Hey there folks, today we're going to talk about the options that we have when we are rendering, serving, or building SvelteKit pages. Things like static file generation. And for that, we're going to keep using the travel journal app that we have been using throughout this SvelteKit core concept series. I added a few pages here, docs, blog, and about, and we're going to see how those options affect these pages here. But before I start doing that, I just want to mention that you might have noticed that I am mirroring car concepts from the documentation here. I haven't created those car concepts out of my mind. And today I am talking about the last one, which is page options. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop talking about Svelte or SvelteKit. It just means that this series is ending right now. So if you have any suggestions or requests for any other things you wanted me to talk, just feel free to say so in the comments below. Now, let's talk about page options, and we're going to start with pre-render. I'm going to come here and display this docs page. Docs here is just documentation, static content, and static content is the optimal candidate for pre-rendering pages. None of these pages here is user dependent or depends on user data. So it's always the same content regardless of the user, right? So we can statically generate those files or pre-render those. And we can do this by coming here in the docs route, the layout.ts file. We do have here pre-render false, which is the default from SvelteKit. If I come here and set this to true, I'm going to stop my dev server and run the build. Then we can come here in .SvelteKit output pre-rendered pages, and we're going to see the docs folder and docs.html here and all the pages that the documentation here that we have. Now, what's the benefit of doing this? Number one, if you're hosting your application in a serverless host, you're not going to waste any compute time generating these files or serving those files, I should say. So you're saving money there. Number two, because they're static, they are more fastly served, so better performance. You could also cache this or host this on a CDN, and all that will improve performance. Okay, so that's the idea there. Now, by making this change here in the layout.ts file, what happens is all of the pages that are under this layout file are going to be pre-rendered unless the page itself changes that configuration. So for instance, here, if I come to the trip structure and I add a new file, .page.ts, and let's just copy this quickly here and set this to false. Build again, we're going to see that trip structure is not going to be pre-rendered. There you go. I only have 4 files and trip structure is not one of those. So you can pre-render at the layout level and all the pages under that layout will be pre-rendered, or you can individually toggle on and off pages because the inverse is also true. By default, no pages are going to be pre-rendered. You can set specific pages to be pre-rendered with the pre-render equals true there. One important point that I want to mention is that this configuration pre-render here and any other of the configurations that I'm going to talk about today, they need to be exported from a page.ts or page.server.ts or layout.ts file. They cannot be exported from the .svelte file, okay? This is exporting from the .svelte file is not going to do anything. Now, let me delete this file, and we're going to continue taking a look now at blog. Okay, in blog, what I do have here is just 3 links to 3 of the most recent posts. But if I come to the page inside of the blog here, we're going to see that in order to render a blog post, we're getting all of the blog posts from libcontent blog, and it's an array of 5 posts. So there are more than 3 available. Okay. If I come here now and let's pre-render the blog, let's see what this means here. I'm gonna first build, and we're gonna see that even though I have 5 posts, only 3 are being pre-rendered during the build process. Why is that? The way that SvelteKit acts on this is it starts on entry points, and one entry point here is the root route. Let me once again start my dev server. And the entry point here, the root route, has links to all of these other pages. So that's what SvelteKit's doing. It's crawling the links from the entry point. It's going to find docs, as we saw, and because the configuration was set to pre-render, it's going to pre-render those. Blog, the same way. It's going to crawl this page, and it's going to find only 3 links to 3 blog posts. And that's why only those 3 are being generated. But in my design here, I only have the recent blog posts. What if I had a search somewhere that could return older blog posts? What happened to those? Well, right now, the way we have this configured, if I come to that, let me go to that blog content here, and I get one of those that's not being pre-rendered, and I try to access it from, well, I need to do this from my build, okay? So I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to run pnpm preview, actually. pn preview was going to serve whatever was built during build time. And if I come here to this other port, which is that preview, and I try to access blog.recap template here, I'm going to get a 404 not found. So that's not ideal because I do have those blog posts. I just don't have direct links from my entry points into those. But I would like to serve those eventually if someone accesses them. There are a couple of ways to fix this. Let's take a look at the first one. In the first one, what I'm going to do is come to the page itself, and I'm going to export entries here. So if I export a constant entries with all of my blog posts like I'm doing here, and I'm going to build this one more time and preview it, what's going to happen is, sorry, let me just click on the correct page, blog. Okay, we have 5 now, and recap template is in there. So of course, if I reload this, I see the page because it has been pre-rendered. What this thing is doing, where is it? There you go. What it's doing is telling SvelteKit all of the entries that could be served under this route here. Now SvelteKit is relying on the values of the entries object here instead of crawling the links of this route to find which pages should be pre-rendered. So this entries here is overriding the crawling activation. And one important thing is when returning entries, we always need to return an object with a slug. That's how SvelteKit knows which routes to render for this specific route here. Okay, but this could also be an issue. So let's say that my blog has thousands, hundreds, I don't know, many blog posts, and I don't want to pre-render every single one of them because people just don't read old blog post entries. I still want to make those available somehow. I just don't want to pre-render all of those. Why wouldn't I do that? Maybe because your build is too long and you just consider that that's not worth it. So that's a way to optimize your build. Now, I'm not going to do this here. What I'm going to do is instead, I'm going to come to the layout, and instead of setting pre-render to true, what I'm going to do is return auto here, or set it to auto. I'm going to stop this, build one more time, and serve this one more time. What you can see here in the pre-render pages is I only have the first 3 as I did before, the ones that were crawled in the blog page. But once again, if I come to this page that it's not pre-rendered, I still can access it. So SvelteKit is smart enough in this auto mode to detect which ones should be pre-rendered and generated at build time, and which ones are still available dynamically if you try to access those. So that's a mix of the both of the 2 worlds there that you can use for pre-rendering. All right, let's move on now and talk about SSR. So SSR is the standard mode of SvelteKit. What it means is HTML is generated on the server side and sent to the client and rendered first. Then on the client, hydration happens where that HTML is compared with the DOM and events are attached, and then everything is pre-rendered again. Okay. Now, what that means or could mean in some cases is that if the page that you're rendering depends on the browser and on the server side, you don't have access to it, the HTML that you're going to send is going to be different from the HTML that you're going to have once the browser is available. And you can see an example here on this page. Pay attention to this bar here. I'm going to reload the page, and you see that it it blinks for a second while it's reloading, okay? It's very fast, but it blinks for a second there. Why? Well, this code here was generated in order to have this bad experience, and you can see it in this page here. On mounting, I'm looking at the document element, client width, and then changing that width, right? So the point here is that there is a difference between the client version of the page and the server-side render of the page. If you don't want that experience of elements flickering, in my case, it's very mild, very subtle, and fast. It could be slower, it could be a big box or something that is actually compromising the user experience. What you can do is you can come and turn SSR to false. So if you do that, what's going to happen is you're not, oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. I need to look at this and I run, and I need to serve the correct one, okay? All right, let's serve this one and I'll reload, and now you don't see that anymore, okay? If I reload as many times as I need to reload here, you're not gonna see that flickering of this bar, because the only time this page is being rendered is on the client side. Another use case for this is if your whole application, the entire application, is embedded into a web view, so it's a mobile application. At that time, you don't have a node process to run SvelteKit and serve applications on the server side. So you need to ship the whole application as an SPA, a single page application. In that case, you should turn that on, turn that off, SSR off to your entire application, and you can do that in the root layout file. So if you just set SSR to false in the root layout file, the whole application is going to be shipped into one HTML file, and all the assets are going to be bundled with that HTML file. In that sense, the web view is just going to load that one HTML file and have access to the assets, but then it's a single page application. So that's the other use case for SSR that I would say here. Now, moving on, and let's talk about the other one, the CSR, client-side rendering. And in this about page here, you can see in the console that I have a log about page loaded. And if I open this page quickly, you're gonna see that on mount, I'm logging this. Now, if I turn this CSR from true, which is the default, to false, you are not going to see that anymore. So I can reload this many times and you're not gonna see this. What's happening here? When we turn off client-side rendering, first, SvelteKit is not sending any JavaScript to the client. So in that sense, you could reduce the size of your application payload by just turning off CSR for certain pages. Second, there is no hydration anymore. So the first paint of that page would normally be a little bit faster because you don't have to reconcile DOM with the server and run that hydration. Okay, so that's another case where you might consider this useful. But there is a downside for it, and I'm gonna show you in the network tab here. Any page that's not client-side rendered, it's not connected to the SvelteKit router, which means that if you navigate away from this page, it is a full page navigation. You're gonna have to reload all the assets. So if I come here to blog and I click on it, everything is loaded again, and you can see that the whole page navigates, okay? That's the experience. You can see all that. Now, this might not be entirely a bad thing if you're willing to live without, but there's another thing that SvelteKit does, and let me switch this back to true. Reload the about page here, okay? Now, what you're gonna see is when I hover blog, you're gonna see that some network requests were triggered. So the default behavior of a SvelteKit application is to prefetch any resources as soon as you hover over a link. And the goal of that is to produce a more performant experience for the user. So if you don't do that, and I'm gonna switch that again to false, just to show you that. If I reload about and I remove or clear my logs here and I hover blog, you don't see anything. So you lose that. You may gain some performance by having a faster first paint, but you also lose some of that when you navigate away from that page. So that's a trade-off to consider there. All right, let's move to another one. And I'm going to confess, I have never used this particularly. I never felt the need for it. But I'm here in the docs route, in the layout of the docs route, and we have this trailing slash. By default, the value is never, okay? But I'm gonna set this to always, and blog is the default, which is never. So if I come here to blog, we're gonna see that we never have the ending slash on any of the routes and nested routes. But in blog, sorry, not blog, docs, we do have now the ending slash. That's what it's doing, okay? And the other part of it is if I build this, let me build this file or this application, I should say, and I come here to pre-render in blog, you're gonna see a blog.html file and its own nested routes with just the name of the route.html. But in docs, what you see is docs and index.html and folders with the names of the routes and then index.html. So that's the other difference here. Personally, I haven't had the need to use this. I leave it the default and that's working fine for me. So maybe you're gonna have a use case. I don't have one for you on that note. The final one I want to talk about, and I'm going to be very high level on this, is the config here. Config is one that I never use, but config is tied to the adapter that you're using. So if you're using, for instance, the adapter Cloudflare, you might have specific configurations for Cloudflare that you can and want to set using that config page option. Same for the other ones, Netlify, Node, but that's tied again to the adapter that you're using. So I haven't had the need for any of this, but you should look into that if there's something specific for the adapter that you're using. And that's it. That's all I wanted to talk about page options today. And that's also the end of this core concept series. Again, if you have any requests on anything that you want to see from me, let me know in the comments. Until next time, thanks for watching.